The morning when a wife owned almost nothing. Imagine the first, pale light of a Victorian morning slowly spreading across the quiet fields of England. A gentle mist lingers above the hedgerows, while tiny drops of dew rest upon blades of grass that bend beneath their own delicate weight. Somewhere beyond the village green, a church bell softly announces the beginning of another ordinary day. Smoke rises lazily from cottage chimneys, carrying the comforting scent of burning oak into the cool morning air. Perhaps you can picture yourself walking along a narrow country lane. Your footsteps are unhurried. A robin sings from a stone wall. A horse and cart rumble gently in the distance, their slow rhythm becoming part of the peaceful landscape. Nothing appears unusual. Everything feels calm, familiar, almost timeless. Ahead stands a small cottage with whitewashed walls and a roof of weathered thatch. Inside, a young wife carefully places another log upon the fire. The crackling flames brighten the room just enough to reveal polished wooden chairs, neatly folded linens, and a kettle beginning to whisper above the hearth, although it might just as easily be Anne Elizabeth or Sarah. There were countless women like her throughout Victorian England. Their names filled parish registers and family Bibles, yet history rarely lingered upon them for long. She pours tea into 2 simple cups before her husband comes downstairs. The bread upon the table was baked yesterday. The butter was carefully saved. Nothing is wasted. Every small household decision matters. As her husband finishes breakfast, he places a few coins into his waistcoat pocket. Mary quietly notices the money, not because she wishes to spend it carelessly, but because she will soon need to visit the village baker. When he leaves for work, she wraps a shawl around her shoulders and steps outside beneath a sky that promises gentle rain before evening. The lane is already filling with familiar faces. A milkmaid balances heavy pails with practiced ease. Children hurry toward the parish school. An elderly gardener tips his hat politely as she passes. The bakery smells wonderfully warm. Fresh loaves rest upon wooden shelves, their crisp crusts glowing softly in the morning light filters through the windows. Mary greets the baker kindly. She asks for a loaf large enough to last until tomorrow. The baker smiles with quiet familiarity. Then comes a moment that would have seemed perfectly ordinary to those living at the time. Though it may surprise us today, Mary does not reach into her own purse. In many households, there was no purse that truly belonged to her. Under the legal doctrine known as a married woman's separate legal identity was largely absorbed into that of her husband. The law did not suggest that she ceased to exist as a person, nor that she lacked intelligence or character. Yet, in many important legal matters, she no longer stood independently before the law. Her wages, if she earned them under many circumstances, could belong to her husband. Property she possessed before marriage often came under his legal control. Contracts became difficult or impossible for her to make in her own name. Bringing many kinds of legal actions without her husband was equally complicated. The rules had developed over centuries within English common law. By the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign in 1837, they shaped countless ordinary moments that rarely appeared remarkable to those living through them. Mary thanks the baker, explaining that her husband will settle the account later that afternoon. No one in the shop appears surprised. An elderly woman waiting beside the counter nods gently, as though this arrangement were simply another part of village life. No stranger than the changing weather or the ringing church bells. As we quietly walk back through the village, listening to sparrows flutter beneath the hedges and watching smoke curl above peaceful cottages, we begin to understand that the greatest restrictions were often hidden inside the smallest daily routines. The morning remains calm. The village carries on with comforting familiarity. Yet beneath this peaceful surface lies a legal world that quietly shapes nearly every choice a married woman can make. Our slow journey has only just begun, and as the afternoon light gradually settles across the fields, Another doorway into Victorian life patiently waits to be opened. The purse that was no longer hers. Imagine that the soft morning mist still lingers over the narrow village lane as the first church bell quietly greets the new day. The stone cottages wear tiny beads of rain upon their windows, and thin ribbons of smoke curl gently upward from their chimneys. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls across the fields, while the steady clip-clop of a horse pulling a milk cart echoes through the peaceful countryside. You walk slowly beside a young married woman named Mary as she wraps a warm shawl around her shoulders and carries a small wicker basket beneath her arm. Inside the basket rests nothing more than a folded cloth and a few empty jars waiting to be filled. She hopes to buy bread, fresh butter, and perhaps a little tea if the household budget allows. Yet before she reaches the baker's door, there is something quietly remarkable about her journey. Although she manages the meals, keeps the fire burning, washes the linen, and stretches every loaf to feed the family, the money she hopes to spend is not truly hers. Perhaps you can picture her pausing outside the bakery, while the comforting scent of warm bread through the cool morning air. The baker knows her well. She has visited countless times before. They exchange friendly smiles and speak politely about the weather, the harvest, and the health of their neighbors. Yet, when coins finally pass across the wooden counter, the law does not see those coins as belonging to Mary. They belong to her husband. This quiet reality grew from an old legal doctrine known as coverture. The word may sound distant and unfamiliar today, yet for centuries it shaped the daily lives of countless married women throughout England. According to this legal principle, a husband and wife became one person after marriage in the eyes of the law, and that one legal person was almost always the husband. A married woman's independent legal identity was largely covered by his. This did not necessarily mean that every husband behaved harshly or unfairly. Many marriages were affectionate, cooperative, and filled with genuine kindness. Many husbands trusted their wives completely with household finances and daily decisions, yet the law itself rested upon different assumptions. It assumed that the husband represented the family in contracts, ownership, and legal responsibility. As you quietly continue walking through the village, you notice children chasing one another beside a stone wall while an elderly woman sweeps her doorstep with slow, practiced movements. Everyday life appears calm and familiar, but beneath these peaceful scenes lies a legal structure that most people simply accepted as part of ordinary life. Mary reaches into a small cloth purse that she carries beneath her cloak. Even if the coins inside were handed directly to her by her husband that morning, they remained his property unless he clearly intended otherwise. If she earned a few pennies by selling eggs from her hens or by sewing garments for neighbors, those earnings generally became her husband's as well. It was not because anyone questioned her honesty or hard work. Rather, the legal system believed that the household functioned under one authority. Imagine sitting quietly beside the warm fireplace in Mary's cottage. Later that evening, the flames crackle gently as iron pots hang above glowing embers. Candlelight dances softly across the rough wooden table where fresh bread now rests beneath a linen cloth. Mary carefully records household expenses in a small notebook, adding numbers with patient attention. She knows exactly how much flour remains, how much coal must last through the week, and whether another candle can be afforded before market day. Her skill in managing the household is considerable, yet the law gives little recognition to these careful responsibilities as independent authority. Perhaps you can picture handwritten letters arriving from distant relatives. If Mary's father wished to leave her a small sum of money, the situation became complicated. Unless special legal arrangements had been made, property inherited by a married woman often came under her husband's control. Wealthy families sometimes created trusts to protect a daughter's inheritance, but such arrangements required careful planning and legal advice that ordinary families rarely possessed. Outside, evening rain begins to fall softly upon the village roofs, and the steady rhythm of droplets against the window creates a peaceful melody. Inside, Mary pours steaming tea into simple cups while conversation drifts gently toward tomorrow's chores, the coming market, and hopes for a good harvest. Life continues with quiet dignity, shaped not only by custom and affection, but also by laws that most people seldom questioned aloud. As the fire settles into glowing embers and the village grows still beneath the night sky, another morning waits just beyond the darkness. And with it, look at how property itself could quietly change hands the moment wedding vows were spoken. The house that belonged to someone else. Imagine that the morning mist has slowly lifted from the countryside, leaving behind fresh green fields washed by gentle rain. Our quiet walk now follows a broad avenue lined with ancient oak trees whose branches sway softly in the mild breeze. Small birds flutter from one hedge to another, and somewhere beyond the rolling hills a carriage moves. At an easy pace along the damp road, the steady rhythm of the horses seems almost like a lullaby as we approach a graceful country house built from warm honey-colored stone. Tall windows reflect the pale sky. Ivy climbs carefully around the walls, and a gardener trims rose bushes with patient hands. Everything appears peaceful, comfortable, and secure. Perhaps you can picture yourself stepping inside. The entrance hall is calm and welcoming. A grandfather clock quietly marks each passing minute. Polished wooden floors shine in the soft daylight that filters through high windows. The air carries the faint scent of beeswax, lavender, and the fire burning gently in the drawing room. A young woman named Eleanor sits beside the window with a piece of delicate embroidery resting upon her lap. Before her marriage several years ago, this house had belonged to her family. Her father had carefully managed the estate, hoping that one day his daughter would enjoy a comfortable future surrounded by familiar gardens and cherished memories. When he passed away, much of the property was intended to support her throughout her life. Yet the law viewed the situation differently after she married. Under the doctrine of much of the property that came into her possession fell under her husband's legal control unless special legal arrangements had been made beforehand. Wealthy families who understood these risks sometimes created marriage settlements and trusts through experienced solicitors. These legal documents could protect certain estates, investments, or incomes for a daughter, allowing them to remain outside her husband's complete control. Such arrangements became increasingly common among the aristocracy and prosperous professional families, but they required planning, expense, and legal knowledge beyond the reach of many ordinary people. Imagine Eleanor rising from her chair and slowly walking through the library. Hundreds of books fill polished shelves from floor to ceiling. She knows every corner of the room because she spent her childhood here reading history, poetry, and travel journals beside her father. Yet, despite her deep affection for the house, ownership in the legal sense no longer rests with her alone. She cannot simply decide to sell part of the estate, sign legal agreements concerning the property, or manage every financial matter independently. Those responsibilities belong largely to her husband under the law. This arrangement was not always noticed during happy marriages, where husband and wife trusted one another completely. Many Victorian husbands consulted their wives, respected their judgment, and relied upon their intelligence in managing large households. Some wives became remarkably skilled administrators, overseeing servants, organizing accounts, supervising repairs, and directing charitable work throughout the local community. Their influence within the home could be considerable, even if their legal authority remained limited. As we quietly continue our walk through the peaceful gardens, we notice servants carefully sweeping stone paths, while the head gardener inspects rows of carefully tended vegetables destined for the kitchen. A maid opens tall windows to welcome the fresh country air. Somewhere in the distance, a piano begins to play, a slow melody that drifts gently, Through the open corridors, life within the estate seems calm and ordered. Yet thoughtful conversations about the law had already begun to appear in drawing rooms and newspapers across Britain. Some lawyers and reformers questioned whether it was fair for married women to lose control over property they had inherited or earned. Their discussions were usually polite and gradual. Rather than sudden or revolutionary, change came slowly in Victorian Britain, often through years of debate in Parliament, legal reform rather than dramatic transformation. Those discussions eventually helped produce the Married Women's Property Act of 1870, was an important first step, allowing married women to keep the wages they earned and giving them greater rights over certain kinds of property acquired after marriage. Even so, many limitations remained, and the law still fell far short of complete legal independence. 12 years later, another significant reform arrived with the Married Women's Property Act of 1882. Law marked a profound change because it recognized married women as separate legal persons for the ownership of property. A married woman could now own, buy, sell, and manage property in her own name much more fully than before. She could also enter contracts and become legally responsible for her own assets and obligations. As afternoon sunlight settles gently across the lawns and the long shadows of ancient trees stretch peacefully over the grass, Eleanor closes the library window and watches the swallows circle above the gardens. The house around her has not changed overnight. The walls remain the same. The fireplaces continue to crackle softly. Tea is served upon fine porcelain exactly as it was yesterday. Yet beneath these familiar comforts, the law itself has begun its slow and careful journey toward recognizing married women as individuals with their own legal identities. As evening approaches and golden light fills the quiet drawing room, our own gentle journey continues toward another corner of Victorian life where family, inheritance, and the hopes of future generations quietly shape the lives of women across England. A letter of inheritance by the fire. Imagine that evening has settled gently across the English countryside. The last golden rays of sunlight rest upon quiet hedgerows before slowly fading into soft shades of blue and silver. A cool breeze stirs the leaves outside while the steady sound of distant church bells drifts peacefully through the still air. Lamps begin to glow behind cottage windows, and the comforting scent of burning coal and seasoned oak spreads through the village. As we quietly continue our journey, we arrive at the home of an elderly solicitor whose office occupies the front rooms of a modest Georgian house. Shelves filled with leather-bound books line the walls from floor to ceiling, each volume containing centuries of legal customs, careful records, and handwritten notes. A large desk stands beside the fireplace where candles burn with steady light, illuminating neat stacks of folded documents waiting to be signed. The room feels warm and unhurried, as though time itself has agreed to move more gently here. Perhaps you can picture an older gentleman carefully dipping a quill into dark ink before writing another graceful line across a sheet of thick paper. Tonight, he is preparing a will for a respected farmer whose family has lived in the surrounding countryside for generations. The farmer sits quietly beside the fire while his wife pours tea into delicate cups. Their daughter Eleanor listens politely from the corner of the room, her sewing resting peacefully upon her lap. No one raises their voice, no one argues. Yet every sentence written upon the page may shape the future of those gathered around the fire. During the Victorian era, inheritance depended upon many different circumstances. English law distinguished between land, money, investments, personal belongings, and family settlements. Customs also varied according to whether someone died with or without a valid will. Among wealthy landowning families, another practice often influenced inheritance. Large estates were sometimes protected through legal arrangements, known as entails or strict settlements. These were designed to keep family land together across generations, frequently directing it toward the nearest male heir, rather than allowing it to be divided freely. This did not apply to every family or every property, but where such settlements existed, daughters often found themselves unable to inherit the principal estate even when they had grown up. Within its walls, imagine Eleanor listening quietly while the solicitor explains the wording of the document to her parents. Her father wishes to provide for her future with genuine affection. He hopes she will always enjoy comfort and security. Yet he also understands that if she marries, property left directly to her could come under her husband's legal control unless careful legal protections are arranged. For this reason, the solicitor suggests placing part of the inheritance into a trust. Such trusts became an important way for families with sufficient means to protect daughters from the full effects of coverture. Trustees would manage the property according to the terms established by the family, allowing income to support the woman while limiting another person's control over the principal assets. These arrangements required expense and professional advice, making them far more common among prosperous households, laboring families. As the fire crackles softly and rain taps gently against the windows, the conversation continues with calm voices. The farmer speaks not only of fields and livestock but also of fairness between his children. His sons will likely inherit responsibilities connected with the farm, yet he wishes his daughters to receive financial security as well. Such decisions were deeply personal and varied from family to family. There was no single story that described every household across Victorian England. In humbler cottages, the situation looked very different. A small tenant farmer or village carpenter might possess little beyond simple furniture, a few tools, clothing, and modest savings. There were no great estates to divide and no complicated trusts to establish. Yet even their inheritance mattered greatly because every blanket, every cooking pot, every piece of land used for vegetables could help determine whether a widow or child managed the difficult years ahead. Widows often held a somewhat different legal position from married women. Once a husband died, a widow regained her separate legal identity. She could own property, enter contracts, and manage her own affairs in ways that had often been restricted during marriage. Even so, her financial security depended greatly upon what resources remained, what provisions had been made, and whether relatives could offer assistance. Many widows lived independently with dignity, while others faced considerable hardship despite their resilience and careful management. The solicitor carefully folds the finished document before sealing it with warm wax. The candlelight reflects upon the deep red seal as though quietly preserving the family's hopes for years yet to come. Outside, the rain has stopped. Moonlight now rests gently upon the wet cobblestones, and the peaceful village has fallen almost completely silent. As we leave the comforting warmth of the solicitor's office and continue our gentle evening walk beneath the stars, another chapter of Victorian life awaits us, one that leads beyond family, property, and inheritance into the solemn halls of the courtroom, where marriage itself could become a question far more difficult to untangle than most young couples ever imagined on their wedding day. The long road to a Victorian divorce. Imagine a cool autumn morning settling over London as a light rain polishes the cobbled streets until they shimmer beneath the gray sky. Horse-drawn carriages move slowly through the mist, their wheels sending quiet ripples across shallow puddles. Shopkeepers lift wooden shutters one by one while chimney smoke rises gently above rows of brick houses. The city is awake, yet it speaks in soft sounds rather than hurried voices. As we quietly walk along one of these broad streets, we arrive before an impressive stone building whose tall columns and heavy oak doors give it an air of solemn dignity. This is a place where lives can change without raised voices or dramatic scenes. Here, the law moves carefully, patiently, and often very slowly, Perhaps you can picture yourself stepping inside. The entrance hall is cool, despite the fires burning in nearby rooms. Boots echo gently upon polished stone floors. Clerks carry neat bundles of papers tied with ribbon. Barristers dressed in dark robes speak quietly together before disappearing into courtrooms lined with carved wooden panels. Candles flicker beside tall windows where the autumn light struggles to enter. Everything feels orderly, deliberate, and restrained. We take our place upon a wooden bench near the back of the courtroom. Before us sits a woman named Margaret. She keeps her hands folded calmly upon her lap while her eyes remain fixed upon the floor. Her face reveals neither anger nor excitement. Only quiet weariness rests upon her expression. Her story is not unusual for the Victorian age, although few women ever reached this courtroom. For much of the 19th century, obtaining a divorce in England was extraordinarily difficult. Before 1857, a full civil divorce that allowed remarriage generally required a private Act of Parliament after earlier proceedings in church and civil courts. The expense was enormous, placing it beyond the reach of almost everyone except the wealthiest families. Ordinary people rarely possessed the money necessary to pursue such a course, even if their marriages had completely broken down. In 1857, an important legal reform arrived with the Matrimonial Causes Act. A new civil court for divorce and matrimonial causes was established, making divorce more accessible than before. Even so, accessible did not mean easy. The process remained costly for many families, required legal representation in numerous cases, and often exposed deeply personal matters before the public. The law also treated husbands and wives differently. A husband could usually obtain a divorce by proving that his wife had committed adultery. A wife, however, generally had to prove adultery together with another serious offense such as cruelty, desertion, incest, or another legally recognized aggravating circumstance. This unequal standard reflected the values and assumptions of Victorian law rather than the personal views of every individual living at the time. Imagine the quiet courtroom as witnesses speak in measured voices. Pens scratch softly across paper while clerks carefully record every statement. No one rushes the proceedings. Every document is examined. Every question is considered. Outside, rain continues to fall against the windows, creating a gentle rhythm that almost softens the seriousness of the room. Margaret listens patiently as lawyers discuss events that have shaped many years of her life. She knows that even if the court grants her request, the future remains uncertain. Respectability mattered greatly in Victorian society. A divorced woman could face social judgment from neighbors, employers, and even relatives. Finding financial security after separation often proved difficult, particularly for women who had few independent resources. As we quietly leave the courtroom for a short while, we notice other people waiting in long corridors. Beneath portraits of distinguished judges, some hold letters folded carefully inside worn envelopes. Others whisper softly with solicitors, who explain unfamiliar legal language in calm voices. The atmosphere is not one of excitement, but of patience, endurance, and hope that the law may eventually offer some measure of resolution. Nearby, a fire burns steadily inside a waiting room where visitors warm their hands against the autumn chill. A maid pours tea into plain cups while newspapers rest untouched upon a polished table. Outside the tall windows, London continues its ordinary day. Omnibuses carry passengers through busy streets. Vendors sell roasted chestnuts beside the pavement. Children hurry home before the evening rain grows heavier. Life beyond the courtroom moves forward, almost unaware of the quiet decisions being made within these walls. As the afternoon light slowly fades into early evening, Margaret gathers her gloves, carefully buttons her coat before stepping back into the cool London air. Her journey is not yet finished. The law may settle one question, but many others remain. Where will she live? How will she support herself? Most painfully of all, what will become of her children? These questions linger gently in the fading daylight as the sound of distant church bells follows us through the mist, leading our peaceful journey toward another chapter, where the bonds between mothers and their children would become one of the most emotional and carefully debated subjects of Victorian England. The quiet house without children's footsteps. Imagine the rain has finally passed, leaving the streets washed clean beneath a pale evening sky. Small pools of water reflect the gentle glow of gas lamps that are being lit, one by one, as twilight settles over London. The clip-clop of horses grows softer as the day comes to its peaceful close, and a cool breeze carries the comforting scent of damp stone, coal fires, and fresh bread from nearby bakeries. As we quietly leave the courthouse behind, our slow walk leads us through a quiet residential street, where modest brick houses stand shoulder to shoulder, their windows glowing warmly against the gathering darkness. One of these homes belongs to a woman named Margaret. A single candle burns upon the windowsill, and inside the sitting room a small fire crackles gently in the grate. The room is neat and carefully arranged. A basket of sewing rests beside a comfortable chair. Several well-read books stand upon a narrow shelf. A teapot waits upon a small round table covered with a simple embroidered cloth. Everything speaks of patience and careful housekeeping. Yet there is also a noticeable silence. It is the kind of silence that comes when children's laughter is absent. Perhaps you can picture Margaret placing another log upon the fire before, quietly opening a small wooden box. Inside are a few treasured possessions: a tiny knitted bonnet, a lock of carefully tied hair, a faded drawing made by small hands several years before. She lifts each keepsake gently, smiling with quiet affection before returning it to its place. During much of the Victorian era, the law generally regarded fathers as the natural legal guardians of legitimate children. If a marriage broke down or a couple separated, fathers usually possessed the stronger legal claim to custody. This could leave many mothers in heartbreaking situations, even when they had devoted themselves completely to raising their children from birth. The legal principle reflected long established ideas about paternal authority within the family. It did not mean that every father chose to separate children from their mothers, nor that every family experienced such sorrow. Many parents remained together throughout their lives, and many fathers encouraged close relationships between mothers and children. Yet, where serious disagreements arose, the law often favored the father's legal rights. As we quietly sit beside the warm fireplace, Margaret unfolds a carefully preserved letter written several years earlier. The handwriting is graceful and familiar. It is a letter from her sister living in a distant county, offering comfort during difficult times. The paper has become soft with age from being read so often. Outside the window, gentle rain begins once again, tapping lightly against the glass while church bells announce the evening hour. In 1839, an important change slowly began to alter this difficult situation: the Custody of Infants Act, promoted through the determined efforts of campaigner Caroline Norton after her own painful experiences, allowed some separated mothers to petition the Court of Chancery for custody of children under the age of 7 and for access to older children under certain circumstances. Although the law remained limited and many restrictions continued, it represented a significant departure from the earlier assumption that fathers alone held nearly absolute legal authority. Imagine a quiet courtroom where a mother speaks respectfully before a judge, asking only for the chance to remain close to her young children. Such hearings were rarely dramatic. They unfolded through careful legal arguments, written petitions, and measured testimony. Every decision depended upon particular circumstances, and success was by no means guaranteed. The legal process remained expensive and emotionally exhausting for many families. Throughout the remainder of the Victorian era, further reforms slowly expanded the court's ability to consider the welfare of children. These changes were gradual rather than sudden, Parliament debated each proposal carefully, and attitudes within society evolved over many decades. By the closing years of Queen Victoria's reign, judges possessed greater flexibility than earlier generations had known, though fathers still retained important legal rights and complete equality had not yet arrived. Margaret carefully closes the wooden box before returning it to the shelf. She pours herself a cup of tea and sits quietly beside the fire as flames cast gentle shadows across the walls. There is no bitterness in the peaceful room, only reflection and hope that future generations might experience kinder circumstances than those known by many women before them. Outside, a neighbor walks home, carrying a sleeping child wrapped warmly beneath a woolen blanket. The sight brings a gentle smile to Margaret's face. She watches only for a moment before drawing the curtains against the cool evening air. As we leave the quiet house behind, the streets have grown almost silent. Gas lamps shimmer softly upon the wet cobblestones, and the distant sound of a carriage gradually disappears into the night. Ahead, another peaceful morning awaits us, one that will lead away from courtrooms and legal documents, toward classrooms filled with books, maps, ink bottles, and eager young minds, where Victorian girls slowly began to discover that education itself could become one of the most important doors to a different future, a classroom filled with quiet possibilities. Imagine that dawn has arrived once more, bringing with it a clear spring morning. The rain has washed the air so thoroughly that every brick chimney, every budding tree, and every narrow lane seems to glow beneath the gentle sunlight. Birds sing cheerfully from garden walls while the sound of distant church bells drifts across the rooftops with calm familiarity. As we quietly leave the silent streets behind, our walk leads us toward a modest schoolhouse standing at the edge of a market town. Its red brick walls are simple rather than grand, and climbing ivy reaches carefully toward tall windows where lace curtains move gently. In the morning breeze, smoke rises from a small chimney, carrying the comforting scent of burning coal into the cool air. Perhaps you can picture yourself stepping inside. The classroom is warm despite the lingering chill outdoors. A cast iron stove quietly heats the room, while rows of polished wooden desks wait patiently for the day's lessons to begin. Bottles of dark ink stand neatly arranged beside slates, copybooks, and well-worn readers. Sunlight streams through the windows, falling across maps of England, carefully written alphabets, and shelves holding a modest collection of books, whose pages have already been turned by many eager hands. Young girls enter quietly, removing bonnets and hanging shawls upon wooden pegs before taking their places. Their dresses are plain but carefully mended. Some arrive carrying lunches wrapped in cloth. Others bring only a small piece of bread for the midday meal. They greet one another with gentle smiles before the schoolmistress opens the lesson with calm authority. During the early Victorian years, educational opportunities for girls varied greatly according to wealth, location, and family circumstances. Many daughters of prosperous families were educated at home by who taught reading, writing, history, geography, music, drawing, French, and proper social accomplishments. Such an education aimed not only to cultivate knowledge, but also to prepare young women for the expectations of polite society. Yet even among wealthy households, advanced study in mathematics, science, law, or classical languages was often considered less important for girls than for their brothers. Perhaps you can picture another home across town where a governess patiently guides two sisters through a French conversation, while a piano waits in the drawing room for the afternoon music lesson. The girls are intelligent and curious. One asks thoughtful questions about astronomy after reading a book borrowed from her father's library. The governess smiles warmly but explains that such subjects are not included in today's schedule. The lesson returns gently to literature and embroidery. Meanwhile, in the village school where we now sit quietly together, The education of working-class girls often follows a different path. Reading, writing, arithmetic, scripture, sewing, and practical household skills occupy much of the school day. These subjects are valuable and useful, preparing many girls for employment in domestic service, shop work, or the responsibilities of managing future households. The atmosphere is one of discipline balanced with kindness. Chalk moves steadily across the blackboard while the schoolmistress reads aloud from a history book. Outside, children playing in the nearby lane pause for a moment as a horse-drawn carriage rolls slowly past the school gate. During Queen Victoria's reign, education itself gradually became more widely available. The Elementary Education Act of 1870 marked an important step by allowing locally elected school boards to establish elementary schools where they were needed. Attendance did not become immediately universal, and further legislation in later years strengthened compulsory education. But the opportunities available to ordinary children slowly expanded as the century progressed. As we quietly watch the classroom, one girl carefully copies a sentence into her notebook. She dreams of becoming a teacher herself one day. Another enjoys numbers and solves arithmetic problems more quickly than many of her classmates. A third writes short stories whenever she finds a spare moment. None of them can yet know exactly where their talents may lead, but the simple act of learning to read fluently opens doors that earlier generations sometimes found firmly closed. By the later Victorian period, new opportunities for women's higher education also began to appear. Colleges such as Girton College, founded in 1869, and Newham College, established in 1871, offered women the chance to pursue serious academic study at Cambridge. Although full university degrees would not yet be granted to women there during Queen Victoria's lifetime, other institutions gradually expanded opportunities as well, reflecting a slow but meaningful change in attitudes toward women's intellectual abilities. Imagine sitting beside one of these older students as she studies late into the evening by lamplight. Thick books rest open upon her desk beside carefully sharpened pencils and neatly organized notes. Outside, rain falls softly against the college windows while the fire glows warmly inside the common room. She studies not because society expects it of her, but because she delights in learning itself. Her quiet determination reflects a growing belief, shared by increasing numbers of families, teachers, and reformers, that women's minds deserved the same opportunity to develop through knowledge and careful study. As the school bell gently announces the end of the day, the girls gather their books and step once more into the bright afternoon. Laughter drifts softly across the schoolyard while swallows circle overhead. Beneath the clear blue sky, our peaceful walk continues. Beside them for a little while before the road slowly turns toward another part of Victorian life where education gives way to work, and where countless women begin each day not in classrooms but in kitchens, laundries, workshops, factories, and busy households that depend upon their quiet labor from dawn until nightfall. The long working day. Imagine that another peaceful morning unfolds over Victorian England. The first rays of sunlight slip gently between rows of brick houses, while a thin veil of mist lingers above the streets. Milk carts begin their slow rounds. Shopkeepers sweep yesterday's dust from their doorsteps, and the distant whistle of a train reminds us that this is an age of industry, as well as quiet country lanes. Church bells ring softly through the fresh morning air as we continue our unhurried journey into another ordinary day. Today, our path first leads toward a handsome townhouse standing along a broad London street. Tall windows reflect the pale sky. Polished brass shines upon the front door, and climbing ivy softens the elegant brick walls. From outside, the house appears perfectly still. Yet inside, the day has already begun long before the family awakens. Perhaps you can picture yourself quietly entering through the servants' entrance at the rear of the house. The kitchen is warm with the comforting smell of fresh bread, tea and porridge cooking upon a large iron range. Copper pots hang neatly from wooden beams, while candlelight still flickers in corners where the morning sun has not yet reached. A young housemaid carefully polishes silver until every spoon catches the light. Nearby, the cook kneads dough with practiced hands, while another servant carries buckets of water upstairs before the household rings for breakfast. Domestic service was the largest single occupation for women in Victorian Britain. Hundreds of thousands of women, many of them very young, left villages and small towns to work in the homes of wealthier families. Some became cooks, housemaids, kitchen maids, nursemaids, laundry maids, or ladies' maids. A few rose to positions of considerable responsibility as housekeepers, who supervised entire staffs within large households. The work demanded discipline, endurance, and long hours. A servant often rose before dawn to light fires throughout the house, and might continue working until late in the evening after lamps had been extinguished, retired for the night. Yet many women also found in domestic service regular meals, accommodation, and wages that could support themselves or help their families back home. Imagine a young maid named Emily quietly climbing a narrow staircase carrying freshly laundered bed linens. Every step must be taken carefully. Every sheet is folded with precision. She knows which room belongs to each member of the household and remembers countless daily routines without needing to be reminded. Her work is rarely noticed when completed perfectly. Yet the comfort enjoyed by the family depends greatly upon her steady efforts. After leaving the townhouse, our gentle walk continues through busier streets where factory chimneys rise above rows of warehouses. The air carries the faint scent of coal, smoke mixed with damp stone after an early shower. Workers move steadily through factory gates while the sounds of machinery drift into the morning air. We approach a textile mill where long windows allow daylight to flood the spinning rooms. Inside, rows of machines stretch across the floor in careful order. Belts turn steadily overhead, powered by steam engines hidden deeper within the building. The sound is constant rather than frantic, a rhythmic hum that fills the great hall from wall to wall. Women and girls stand beside spinning frames with remarkable concentration, watching threads that must not break as cotton passes through the machinery. Textile factories employed large numbers of women throughout the Victorian period, particularly in regions such as Lancashire and Yorkshire. Their work required skill, patience, and careful attention. Factory legislation gradually improved conditions during the 19th century by limiting working hours for women and children and introducing various safety regulations. Though the work remained demanding and the days were still long, during the midday meal, the machinery grows quiet for a little while. Workers gather together with simple lunches wrapped in cloth. Bread, cheese, cold potatoes, and tea provide welcome comfort before the afternoon begins. Conversations are gentle. Friends speak about younger brothers attending school, letters received from home, and hopes of saving enough money for the future. Some dream of marriage. Others hope to open small shops or become dressmakers. Many simply hope for steady employment through another winter. Not every working woman labored in great houses or factories. Across towns and villages, thousands earned their living as laundresses, shop assistants, teachers, midwives, straw hat makers, milliners, or some worked from their own homes, sewing garments late into the evening by candlelight. Others assisted in family businesses where husbands, wives, and children shared responsibilities together. Opportunities remained limited compared with those available to men, yet the variety of women's work gradually expanded as the century progressed. As the afternoon sunlight begins to soften, we quietly leave the factory behind. Workers step through the gates with tired but steady footsteps, circle above the rooftops, Far beyond the city smoke, the countryside waits in peaceful silence. There, among winding lanes, grazing sheep, and small stone cottages, another way of life continues at its own gentle rhythm. Our journey now turns away from the growing industrial towns toward the quiet villages, where countless women balance the changing seasons, family life, and the endless work of keeping both home and farm together beneath the wide English sky. The quiet rhythm of the village. Imagine that the smoky rooftops of the great industrial towns have faded behind us, replaced by wide green meadows stretching peacefully beneath an endless English sky. The morning sun rises slowly above gentle hills where sheep graze among ancient hedgerows, and tiny beads of dew sparkle upon wildflowers. Growing beside a winding country lane, a lark sings high above the fields while the soft sound of a distant stream accompanies every quiet step we take. Horse-drawn carts move unhurriedly toward the weekly market, their wooden wheels creaking softly along the narrow road. Everything here seems to breathe at a slower pace, following the steady rhythm of the changing seasons rather than the whistle of factory engines. Perhaps you can picture yourself approaching a small stone cottage with a roof of weathered slate. Roses climb around the doorway, and neat rows of vegetables fill the little garden behind a low wooden fence. Smoke rises gently from the chimney, carrying the comforting scent of burning peat and fresh bread into the cool morning air. Before the village has fully awakened, a woman named Hannah has already begun her day. She quietly stirs the porridge, simmering over the fire while a black kettle hums softly beside it. The kitchen is warm despite the morning chill. Copper pots catch the golden light of the flames, and bundles of dried herbs hang from dark wooden beams above her head. Life for many rural women in Victorian England rarely followed a strict division between home and work. The cottage itself was both household and workplace. Hannah prepares breakfast, but before long she will also gather eggs from the hens, milk the family's cow, tend the vegetable garden, mend clothing, bake bread, and help wherever the small farm requires another pair of capable hands. During harvest, she may spend long hours in the fields alongside her husband and older children. During winter, she may sew by candlelight, while the wind whistles gently around the cottage walls. As we quietly follow her through the garden, the air smells of damp earth and freshly cut herbs. Dew clings to cabbage leaves while apple trees sway gently in the morning breeze. She pauses to scatter grain for the chickens before collecting several warm eggs from beneath the straw. Nearby, her youngest child carefully watches a butterfly resting upon a patch of lavender. The simple beauty of the morning asks for nothing more than quiet attention. Many women living in rural villages contributed significantly to the family economy, even though much of their labor remained unpaid and was seldom recorded in official documents. They churned butter, preserved fruit, raised poultry, cared for dairy animals, sold eggs or homemade goods at local markets, and managed countless practical tasks that helped sustain the household throughout the year. Their work was constant, though often unnoticed beyond the boundaries of the village. Perhaps you can picture market day arriving beneath a sky filled with slow-moving clouds. Villagers gather around wooden stalls, displaying baskets of apples, freshly baked loaves, cheeses wrapped in cloth, jars of honey, and bunches of fragrant flowers. Hannah carries several dozen eggs in a carefully woven basket. She exchanges warm greetings with neighbors whose families have lived here for generations. News travels quietly through friendly conversation. Someone speaks of a successful harvest. Another mentions a new school opening in the neighboring parish. A blacksmith discusses repairs to a bridge damaged during the winter floods. Life in the village is closely woven together, each household depending in small ways upon the others. Yet even within this peaceful community, the legal realities we have encountered throughout our journey remain quietly present. If Hannah is married, much of what she earns through selling eggs or butter may legally belong to her husband, especially during the earlier decades of Queen Victoria's reign before reforms to married women's property rights. In everyday practice, many farming families managed their resources cooperatively, making decisions together according to trust and necessity. Nevertheless, beneath these ordinary routines still reflected the doctrine of coverture. As afternoon sunlight warms the fields, Hannah joins several neighboring women beside a stone well. Buckets are lowered carefully into the cool water while conversation flows as gently as the breeze passing through the ash trees. They speak of children learning their letters, elderly parents whose health requires increasing care, and letters recently received from sons or daughters who have found work in distant towns. The great changes of Victorian Britain slowly reach even these quiet villages. Railways bring new goods and new ideas. Newspapers arrive more regularly. Education becomes more available, yet the pace of life remains shaped above all by sunrise, rainfall, planting, and harvest. Evening arrives with remarkable gentleness. Cows wander slowly back toward their buyers, while swallows dip gracefully above the fields catching insects in the fading light. Church bells ring across the valley, their familiar sound echoing among the hills exactly as they have done for generations. Inside the cottage, Hannah lights a pair of candles before placing a simple supper upon the wooden table. Bread, cheese, vegetables from the garden, and warm stew fill the room with comforting aromas. The family gathers quietly together, while the fire crackles beside them, casting soft golden light across smiling faces, tired from honest work. As darkness settles over the countryside, stars gradually appear above the silent fields. The village grows peaceful once again, wrapped in the calm embrace of the English night. Our own gentle journey continues beneath those same stars toward another corner of Victorian life, where the quiet rituals of courtship, marriage, and family expectation shaped the hopes and futures of countless young women long before they ever stood before a church altar. A cup of tea before the wedding. Imagine a peaceful afternoon settling over a quiet English town as the golden light of early autumn stretches gently across rows of brick houses and neatly tended gardens. Horse-drawn carriages pass at an easy pace beneath chestnut trees whose leaves have begun to turn shades of amber and gold. The air carries the comforting fragrance of fresh bread, damp earth, and coal fires just beginning to warm family homes before evening. As we quietly walk along a narrow lane, we arrive at a welcoming house where lace curtains frame polished windows and climbing roses still bloom. Despite the changing season, inside, the drawing room glows with soft candlelight even before sunset. A cheerful fire crackles in the grate. Silver teapots shine upon a polished table, and delicate china cups wait beside neatly arranged slices of sponge cake and warm buttered scones. Perhaps you can picture a young woman named Elizabeth smoothing her simple blue dress before greeting a visitor. This afternoon, a young gentleman has been invited to take tea with her family. During much of the Victorian-era courtship, often unfolded within the careful watch of parents and relatives, particularly among the middle and upper classes, respectability, kindness, steady employment, religious values, and good character were frequently considered as important as affection itself. Private meetings between unmarried couples were often limited, and many conversations took place in drawing rooms where family members remained nearby. As tea is poured into delicate cups, conversation moves gently from the weather to books, music, and village news. Elizabeth's mother asks thoughtful questions about the visitor's work, while her father quietly discusses recent improvements to the local railway. Between these polite exchanges, the young couple occasionally share shy smiles that reveal hopes for the future. If a courtship continued successfully, an engagement might follow, marked not by grand celebration alone, but by careful preparation for married life. Families discussed practical matters alongside warm congratulations. A household would need furniture, linen, cookware, and dependable income. Marriage was understood, not only as a romantic union, but also as the foundation of a stable home. Imagine several weeks passing as handwritten invitations are carefully addressed by candlelight. A dressmaker measures fabric with patient hands while neighbors prepare flowers. Gathered from late summer gardens. Church bells ring softly on the wedding morning as villagers arrive wearing their finest clothes. The ancient stone church stands peacefully beneath the clear sky, its stained glass glowing with gentle color as sunlight enters through tall windows. The ceremony itself is quiet and dignified. Vows are exchanged with sincere voices, while family and friends look on with affectionate smiles. Yet beneath the joy rests an important legal reality. The moment the marriage takes place, especially during the earlier decades of Queen Victoria's reign, the doctrine of coverture begins to shape the bride's legal position. The same woman who only yesterday could own property, sign certain agreements, and stand independently before the law now enters a different legal relationship. Many brides fully expected this change because it reflected long-established custom. Some entered happy marriages built upon mutual respect and cooperation. Others would gradually discover how much their legal independence had narrowed. As evening falls, the wedding breakfast fills the house with cheerful conversation. Candles flicker softly across silver while laughter rises gently above the music of a violin played near the fireplace. Elizabeth looks around the familiar room where she spent her childhood, knowing that tomorrow she will begin life in another home. Society expected Victorian wives to create households marked by order, kindness, economy, and moral guidance. Mothers were often regarded as the first teachers of their children, responsible for nurturing both good manners and strong character. These expectations could bring deep satisfaction for many women who treasured family life, yet they also placed significant responsibilities upon their shoulders. As the last guests quietly depart beneath a sky filled with bright autumn stars, the newly married couple watches the lanterns fade along the village lane. The fire inside the house burns lower, while the church bells fall silent once more. Our peaceful journey continues with them into the years that follow, where ordinary domestic life will gradually meet the growing voices of women who begin to wonder whether tradition and the law might one day evolve together through patience and steady determination. Quiet conversations that began to change England. Imagine a cool evening settling gently over London as a soft mist rises above the streets and the warm glow of gas lamps begins to reflect upon rain-polished cobblestones. Horse-drawn carriages move quietly through the fading light, while the distant bells of a nearby church mark the passing of another peaceful day. As we continue our slow journey, we arrive at a comfortable townhouse where golden candlelight shines through tall windows draped with heavy curtains. Inside, the drawing room is warm and welcoming. A cheerful fire crackles steadily in the fireplace, filling the room with the comforting scent of burning oak. Fine china cups rest upon a polished tea table beside neatly arranged sandwiches, slices of sponge cake, and a silver teapot that sends delicate curls of steam into the quiet air. Perhaps you can picture several women gathering together after the evening meal. They remove their gloves, fold their shawls neatly across the backs of upholstered chairs, and greet one another with gentle smiles. Their voices remain calm and thoughtful. No one speaks loudly. There is no sense of urgency. Instead, the room feels like a place where ideas are allowed to grow slowly, just as flowers bloom patiently in an English garden. One woman opens a recently published book while another unfolds a newspaper, describing debates taking place in Parliament. They speak about education, property, employment, and the changing opportunities available to women throughout the country. Many of these conversations resemble countless others happening quietly across Victorian Britain, where thoughtful people met in homes, reading circles, and charitable organizations. The desire for change often began not with public demonstrations but with careful discussion around ordinary tea tables. Among those whose voices gradually reached a wider audience was Barbara Lee Smith. She carefully studied the laws affecting married women and published clear explanations showing how existing legal rules limited their independence. She also supported improved educational opportunities for women and helped establish institutions that encouraged serious academic study. Her work combined practical reform with patient persuasion, reflecting the measured pace at which Victorian society often changed. Another important figure was Emily Davies, who believed deeply that women deserved access to higher education equal in quality to that offered to men. Through years of determined effort, she played a leading role in the founding of Girton College, creating new opportunities for women who wished to pursue university-level learning. Imagine a young student reading one of her speeches beside a quiet fireplace, discovering for the first time that higher education might become part of her own future. In another part of the room, someone mentions Josephine Butler, whose work focused upon protecting vulnerable women and challenging laws that she believed treated them unfairly. Her campaigns required remarkable courage, yet they were carried forward through speeches, writing, careful organization, and countless conversations with supporters across Britain. The women gathered around the fire listened thoughtfully. They may not agree upon every question, but they share a belief that careful reform is possible. Perhaps you can picture handwritten letters lying upon the table, beside the teacups. Their elegant script carries invitations to meetings, drafts of petitions, and thoughtful replies exchanged between friends separated by many miles. Before telephones became common, such letters formed the quiet threads connecting people who hoped to improve society through peaceful discussion. Each envelope traveled by rail and carriage before finally arriving at another welcoming drawing room where another conversation would begin. As the evening continues, the discussion turns gently toward the subject of voting. During the Victorian era, the movement for women's suffrage was still developing. Some organizations focused first upon property rights, education, and employment, while others gradually argued that political representation would also become necessary. The better-known suffragette campaigns of the early 20th century still lay in the future. During Queen Victoria's reign, many women who supported voting rights described themselves as suffragists and generally pursued change through petitions, public meetings, essays, and respectful appeals to Parliament. The atmosphere remains remarkably peaceful. Outside, light rain begins once more, tapping softly against the windows while the fire glows warmly inside. One guest quietly refills the teacups as another carefully folds away the newspaper. There is no certainty about how quickly the law will change. Some reforms may require years, others may take generations, yet everyone gathered in the room understands that even the longest journey begins with thoughtful conversation shared among ordinary people. As the guests prepare to leave, shawls are wrapped once again around their shoulders, and lanterns are lit for the journey home. Through the quiet streets, the drawing room gradually grows silent except for the gentle crackle of the dying fire. Our own peaceful walk continues into the cool London night, where the voices we have just heard will slowly echo through the remaining years of the Victorian age, carrying with them hopes that the ordinary lives of daughters, wives, mothers, and workers might continue to change one careful step at a time. A walk through an ordinary Victorian day. Imagine a bright spring morning arriving quietly over London during the closing years of Queen Victoria's reign. The city awakens beneath a pale blue sky as sunlight settles upon rows of brick buildings and long terraces lined with flowering window boxes. The air is cool and fresh after gentle rain during the night, and the streets gradually fill with familiar sounds. Horse-drawn omnibuses roll steadily along broad avenues while newspaper boys call softly to early customers. Shopkeepers lift painted shutters, sweep their doorsteps, and arrange neat displays behind polished glass. As we quietly begin another peaceful walk together, it becomes easier to notice how everyday life has slowly changed since the beginning of the Victorian era. Perhaps you can picture a young woman named Clara leaving her modest boarding house with a carefully folded umbrella. Resting beneath her arm, she wears a neatly tailored walking dress, gloves, and a straw hat decorated with simple ribbon. In one hand, she carries a small handbag that truly belongs to her. Such an ordinary detail would have held greater meaning only a few decades earlier, thanks to the Married Women's Property Acts of 1870, and especially, many married women could now own property, control their earnings, enter contracts, and manage their own financial affairs in ways that had once been impossible. Under the older doctrine of coverture, the change did not solve every difficulty, yet it quietly transformed countless ordinary moments. As Clara walks along the pavement, she pauses outside a bookshop where new novels, history books, and scientific journals fill the display window. She steps inside, spends several peaceful minutes, turning carefully through freshly printed pages. Reading has become an important part of daily life for many women, and public libraries are gradually welcoming increasing numbers of female readers. Knowledge that once seemed reserved for a smaller portion of society now reaches a wider audience through affordable books, newspapers, and magazines, carried by expanding railway networks across the country. Our gentle walk continues, public park where children sail toy boats upon a small pond while nurses push elegant prams beneath flowering trees. Mothers sit upon wooden benches, sewing tiny garments or reading quietly. As birds sing overhead, the atmosphere feels calm and hopeful. Women move freely through these public spaces, visiting friends, shopping, teaching, or traveling by train when family or work requires it. Yet even within these ordinary freedoms, certain boundaries remain. Most professions are still largely closed to women, especially the higher positions in law, politics, and many branches of public administration. Some occupations are opening gradually, but progress is careful rather than swift. Imagine Clara continuing her walk toward a small office where she works as a typist. The clicking of early typewriters mingles softly with the scratching of fountain pens across ledgers. During the later Victorian years, work slowly begins to offer respectable employment for increasing numbers of educated women. Telegraph offices, schools, hospitals, and businesses provide opportunities that would have been far less common for their mother's generation. Even so, many employers continue to pay women lower wages than men performing similar duties, reflecting attitudes that remain deeply rooted within society. As afternoon arrives, we stop for tea in a quiet refreshment room where polished wooden tables stand beside large windows overlooking the busy street. Steam rises gently from porcelain cups while conversations drift softly between neighboring tables. Two elderly ladies discuss charitable work at the parish church. A young governess writes a letter to her parents before returning to her pupils. Nearby, a schoolteacher marks exercise books with careful attention. These women lead different lives, yet each experiences the Victorian world in her own way, balancing opportunity with expectation, independence with convention. Evening slowly settles across the city. Gas lamps flicker into life while the last rays of sunlight fade beyond the rooftops. Clara returns home carrying a newly borrowed book beneath her arm. She pauses for a moment upon a bridge, overlooking the River Thames where reflections shimmer peacefully upon the dark water. The city around her is changing, though few changes arrive all at once. They come quietly through new laws, improved education, expanding employment, thoughtful conversations, and the patient efforts of countless ordinary people whose names may never appear in history books. as the bells of a nearby church gently announce the evening hour and the first stars begin to appear above the rooftops. Our own peaceful journey continues toward the final years of Queen Victoria's reign, where the slow turning of history becomes more visible than ever before, not through sudden transformation, but through the steady accumulation of many small and lasting changes, the turning of a new century. Imagine a quiet autumn evening in the closing years of Queen Victoria's reign. The sun hangs low above the rooftops, bathing the streets in a warm golden light that softens every brick, wall, and every chimney. A gentle breeze stirs the yellow leaves that drift slowly across the pavement, while the steady sound of horses' hooves echoes peacefully between rows of elegant townhouses. Gas lamps have not yet been lit, and for a little while the city rests in that beautiful moment between daylight and evening when everything seems calm and unhurried. As we continue our gentle walk together, it becomes easier to notice that England itself has changed during the many years we have traveled through its history. The cottages remain. The churches still ring their familiar bells. Fires continue to glow warmly inside drawing rooms, and families still gather around polished tea tables at the close of each day. Yet beneath these comforting routines, the law and society have slowly begun to move in new directions. Perhaps you can picture a young woman named Alice leaving a railway station with a small leather case in her hand. Only a generation earlier, such a journey might have seemed unusual for many women, traveling alone. Now the expanding railway network connects towns and cities across Britain, making travel more common for teachers, nurses, governesses, shop assistants, clerks, and students. The station is filled with the quiet sounds of steam, the gentle hiss of engines, and the polite conversations of passengers waiting beneath the great iron roof. Alice confidently checks the time upon the station clock before continuing toward the school where she has recently accepted a position as a teacher. Education has opened new possibilities for women that would have seemed difficult to imagine at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign. More girls attend elementary schools. More women train as teachers. Colleges continue to expand opportunities for higher learning, and a growing number of professions slowly begin to welcome educated women. Although many barriers remain firmly in place, medicine offers limited opportunities through pioneering women doctors, while nursing has become increasingly respected after important reforms in hospital care during the century. Offices employ female typists and clerks. Libraries welcome women readers, and shops rely upon capable assistants, whose careful work keeps busy towns running smoothly. As we quietly pass through the streets, we notice women moving with quiet purpose. One carries books borrowed from the public library. Another posts a carefully written letter before continuing to her office. A mother walks beside her daughter, who proudly wears her school satchel over one shoulder. Nearby, an elderly widow manages the accounts of a small family business with practiced confidence. These ordinary scenes reveal changes that have arrived gradually, rather than suddenly. Many women now exercise greater control over property than their mothers once could. Some earn wages that they manage themselves. Others pursue education with ambitions that previous generations rarely had the chance to explore. Yet Victorian society still expects much from women within the home. Marriage remains the path followed by many, and the responsibilities of caring for children, maintaining households, and supporting family life continue to occupy countless hours each day. Even educated women who pursue careers often discover that opportunities remain narrower than those available to men. Universities are opening their doors more widely, but equal recognition has not yet fully arrived. Political rights remain limited, and women still cannot vote in parliamentary elections. The conversations begun in quiet drawing rooms have not ended. They continue patiently through meetings, petitions, and thoughtful public discussion, Imagine entering a peaceful public reading room as evening approaches. Tall windows overlook a tree-lined square where children play. Beneath the fading sunlight, inside, rows of wooden tables are illuminated by green shaded lamps. Men and women sit quietly together reading newspapers, scientific journals, and works of literature. A young woman carefully copies notes into a notebook while an older gentleman studies a parliamentary report. No one speaks above a whisper. Knowledge itself has become more accessible than ever before, and with knowledge comes the gentle possibility of further change. Outside, the first gas lamps begin to glow along the streets. Shop windows shine softly against the growing darkness, while the comforting aroma of roasted chestnuts drifts from a nearby vendor. Church bells announce the evening hour, just as they have done throughout our journey. From the earliest years of the Victorian age, their familiar sound reminds us that although history often seems to move slowly, each passing year quietly adds another small stone to the road ahead. As Alice reaches her lodging for the night, she places her books neatly upon a small wooden desk before lighting a single candle. Its warm glow fills the room with gentle light as she opens a notebook to prepare tomorrow's lessons. Beyond her window, the city settles peacefully into silence. Above the rooftops, countless stars appear one by one, watching over an England standing quietly at the edge of a new century. Our own journey now draws ever closer to its gentle conclusion, where we will pause beside one final fireside to reflect upon how the smallest acts of ordinary people often shape history more deeply than they could ever have imagined. An evening of quiet change. Imagine that winter has gently settled across England during the final years of Queen Victoria's reign. Snow rests lightly upon cottage roofs and the branches of ancient oak trees, while the last glow of sunset fades into a peaceful violet sky. The village lanes have become quiet beneath a soft blanket of frost, and every window shines with warm candlelight that welcomes travelers home before night fully arrives. As we continue our slow journey together, we come to a comfortable country house where friends and neighbors have gathered for a simple evening by the fire. The sitting room is filled with gentle warmth. Oak logs crackle steadily in the wide fireplace, their glowing embers casting dancing light across polished furniture. Shelves of well-loved books and carefully framed family portraits. A silver teapot rests upon the hearth to keep warm, while the pleasant fragrance of tea, baked apples, cinnamon, and fresh bread fills the quiet room. Perhaps you can picture yourself taking a comfortable chair beside the fire as the conversation begins. An elderly grandmother gently folds her knitting upon her lap while her daughter pours tea into delicate china cups. Beside them sits a young granddaughter who has recently completed her studies at a training college and now hopes to become a school. The three women represent different chapters of the Victorian age, each shaped by the customs and laws of her own generation. The grandmother smiles softly as she remembers her wedding many decades earlier. She recalls how natural it seemed that her husband managed the family's legal affairs because nearly everyone around her accepted that arrangement as simply the way life worked. She speaks without bitterness, only with the quiet understanding that customs often feel permanent while we are living through them. Her daughter listens thoughtfully. She remembers the years when Parliament gradually changed the law concerning married women's property. Those reforms did not transform everyday life overnight, yet they slowly altered the legal foundation beneath countless homes across England. She recalls neighbors discussing the new legislation over tea tables, wondering how these changes might affect daughters who had not yet married. The youngest woman listens with bright curiosity. For her, attending college has become possible because opportunities for women's education have steadily expanded. Throughout the century, she speaks of classrooms filled with eager girls, learning history, geography, literature, arithmetic, and science. She hopes that each new generation will possess a little more knowledge than the one before it. Not to leave old traditions behind completely, but to understand them more clearly. Outside the windows, snowflakes continue to fall almost silently beneath the glow of the village lamps. A horse and carriage passes slowly along the frozen lane, its wheels muffled by fresh snow while distant. Church bells announce the evening hour. Inside the house, conversation turns toward the many women whose names rarely appeared in newspapers. The cook who rose before dawn every morning, the laundress whose hands became rough from years of hard work, the village midwife who quietly welcomed new lives into the world, the governess who encouraged generations of children to discover the joy of reading, the factory worker who carefully saved a few coins each week for her younger brothers and sisters, the widow who managed her household with remarkable courage after losing her husband. None of these women considered themselves famous, yet together they formed the quiet foundation of Victorian society. Imagine the fire burning lower as candles flicker gently across the room. A handwritten family Bible rests upon a small table beside several carefully preserved letters tied together with faded ribbon. Their ink has grown pale over the years, but each page carries the voices of ordinary people whose hopes, worries, and daily routines shaped history in ways they could never fully see. As the evening grows later, the conversation becomes softer still. The grandmother smiles as her granddaughter quietly reads aloud from a favorite book while the wind whispers gently beyond the windows. The warmth of the fire, the peaceful ticking of the clock, and the familiar comfort of family fill the room with a deep sense of calm. Our own gentle journey is almost complete. Just beyond this quiet winter evening waits one final chapter, where we will leave the Victorian age with gratitude for its lessons and reflect peacefully upon how history often changes not through sudden moments alone, through countless ordinary lives, lived with patience, kindness, perseverance, and quiet hope. The gentle turning of history. Imagine that one final evening has settled peacefully over Victorian England. The sky above the quiet countryside is clear, and countless stars shine softly over winding lanes, ancient church towers, and rows of cottages where warm fires still glow behind small windows. A light frost sparkles upon the hedgerows, and somewhere in the distance the familiar sound of church bells drifts gently across sleeping fields. The horses have long since returned to their stables. The village shops have closed their doors, and only the occasional carriage passes slowly along the silent road. As we quietly continue our final walk together, everything seems wrapped in a calm that belongs only to the closing hours of a winter night. Perhaps you can picture yourself walking once more beside the people we have quietly met. Throughout this journey, there is Mary leaving the village bakery with fresh bread carefully wrapped beneath her arm. There is Eleanor standing beside the tall library window of the country house where she once discovered that ownership and legal control were not always the same thing. Margaret quietly closes the small wooden box. Hannah finishes feeding her hens before returning to the warmth of her cottage. Emily places polished silver neatly upon the dining table before the household awakens. Clara carries another borrowed book beneath her arm as she crosses the bridge over the River Thames. Alice prepares tomorrow's lessons by the gentle glow of a single candle. None of them were queens or famous politicians. None commanded great armies or delivered speeches before enormous crowds. Yet each lived within the quiet current of history, helping to shape the world through ordinary days filled with work, kindness. As we pause beside a peaceful village green, the air carries the comforting fragrance of burning wood and fresh bread drifting from nearby cottages. Candlelight flickers behind lace curtains while families gather around evening meals, sharing simple conversations before another working day begins. With the morning bells, these quiet domestic scenes rarely appear in official records, yet they formed the heart of Victorian England. Laws passed in Parliament mattered greatly. but they only became real when they touched the ordinary routines of everyday life. A new property law mattered because a wife could finally keep what she earned. A new educational opportunity mattered because a young girl could open a book that her grandmother had never been encouraged to read. A change in custody law mattered because a mother might remain close to her children. Progress was measured not only in legal documents, but also in peaceful kitchens, schoolrooms, sewing rooms, libraries, village lanes, railway stations, and warm drawing rooms where thoughtful conversations continued beside glowing fireplaces. History often appears dramatic when viewed from a great distance, yet living through it usually feels much quieter. Most people wake before sunrise, prepare breakfast, write letters, mend clothing, teach children, tend gardens, care for neighbors, and return home before evening. Only many years later do they discover that the ordinary choices they made became part of something much larger than themselves. The Victorian era reminds us that lasting change rarely arrives all at once. It moves patiently through generations. One law is amended, another school opens its doors, a family encourages a daughter to continue her education, a writer publishes careful arguments, a neighbor shares a thoughtful conversation over tea, a judge interprets a new act of parliament. Little by little, the landscape of everyday life begins to shift. By the end of Queen Victoria's reign, women in Britain possessed greater educational opportunities, stronger property rights, broader employment possibilities, and increasing influence within public life than they had known at its beginning. Many inequalities remained, and much work still lay ahead in the 20th century. But the direction of change had become unmistakable. It had been shaped not only by well-known reformers, but also by countless ordinary women and men whose quiet perseverance carried new ideas from one generation to the next. Imagine now that our journey has come to its peaceful end. The fire before us has settled into glowing embers that radiate a gentle warmth across the room. Outside, the night is still. Snow rests softly upon the rooftops, and the last church bell fades into the distance. The pages of history close as gently as a favorite old book, leaving behind not loud triumphs, but quiet understanding. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of Victorian England. History changes, slowly through ordinary people, far more often than through famous moments alone. It changes through families who raise children with care, teachers who patiently share knowledge, workers who perform honest labor, neighbors who help one another, and thoughtful people who believe that tomorrow can become a little kinder than yesterday. May these peaceful stories remain with you like the comforting glow of a fireplace on a winter evening, bringing calm thoughts as you drift gently toward sleep. And if you would like to return for more cozy evenings beside the fire, listening to quiet stories from Victorian England, I warmly invite you to subscribe and join me again for more historical stories by the fireplace. Good night, and may your dreams be as peaceful as the quiet English countryside beneath the stars.